are worthy of every breath we breathe. Let praise rise from every tongue, every tribe, every nation underneath the sun. For you are worthy of every breath we breathe. We lift you higher. Your name is greater. All praises rising to the everlasting God. Let praise rise as we lift you up. A church united because of your love. You gave your life and reign in victory. Let praise rise as we lift you up. A church united because of your love. You gave your life and reign in victory. We lift you higher. Your name is greater. Your praise is rising to the everlasting God. You are life. You are truth. We surrender all to you. You are hope. You are joy. You are Jesus. You satisfy. You are life. You are truth. We surrender all to you. You are hope. You are joy. You are Jesus. You satisfy. We lift you higher. Your name is greater. All praise is rising to the everlasting God. We lift you higher. Your name is greater. Oh, all praise is rising to the everlasting God. You came to the world you created, trading your crown for a cross. You willingly died, your innocent life paid the cost. Counting your status as nothing, the King of all kings came to serve. Washing my feet, covering me with your love. If more of you means less of me, take everything. Yes, all of you is all I need. Take everything. You are my life and my treasure, the one that I can't live without. Here at your feet, my desires and dreams I lay down. Here at your feet, my my desires and dreams I lay down. If more of you means less of me, take everything. Yes, all of you is all I need. Take everything. No means less of me. Take everything. Yes, all of you is all I need. Take everything. Oh Lord, change me like only you can. Here with my heart in your hands. Father, I pray, make me more like Jesus. This world is dying to know who you are. You've shown us the way to your heart. So Father, I pray, make me more like Jesus. Oh Lord, change me like only you can. Here with my heart in your hands. Father, I pray, make me more like Jesus. This world is dying to know who you are. You've shown us the way to your heart. So Father, I pray, make me more like Jesus. More like Jesus. More like Jesus. Lord, if more of you means less of me, take everything. Yes, all of you is all I need. Take everything. If more of you means less of me, take everything. Yes, all of you is all I need. Take everything.
It's good to be with you guys. I want to share some good news, multiple pieces of good news, but the first piece, I think some of this was said here last week, but I'll reiterate if some of this was already mentioned, okay? In the last 2 weeks, if you count what's going on at both our campuses here and our sister church in Titusville, we've had 10 people baptized into Christ. 10 people. Very, very encouraging, and not to be biased at all, but my son was one of them. He's sitting right there in the booth. If you want to bother him between services, please, by all means. He would hate it, which means I would love it, so please bother him. Also, I want to say a big thank you. Yesterday we had a great turnout, and we got all this stuff essentially painted, put together, and built for the amazing race event that we're putting on this weekend. So thank you to all the volunteers that showed up and helped. And by the way, this event that we're putting on for adoptive foster care, foster families, not only is it going to be able to have a good impact just because it's a good event and people have pitched in to help, but a lot of you have also helped by donating gift cards. And we really, really appreciate that too. As a matter of fact, last I checked, it looks like we have over $2,000 in gift cards that we're going to be giving out to our foster and adoptive families in this county, which I think that communicates something. That communicates something sincere and, put your money where your mouth is kind of a thing. Well, yeah. And it's a big mouth too. So anyway, thank you so much for doing that. Now, that's a lot of good news. Let's shift to something negative. Anyone recognize this face? This man's name is Dennis Lynn Rader. Anyone recognize him? You might know the other expression, the nickname BTK. The BTK killer. Dennis Lynn Rader was known as the BTK killer. He killed 10 people between the years 1974 and 1991, right? And he would have gotten away with his murders. But he was caught 14 years later. 14 years later, he was caught. And you probably wonder, how? How was this man caught after all these years? Well, roughly 13 years later, after the last murder, so this would be in the year 2004, Dennis began leaving clues. Yeah, clues in public places. He sent pictures to a newspaper. He even sent ideas for a book that could be written about him, and he sent those ideas to a radio station. He even took a list of chapters, a chapter division thing called the BTK story. Our slides have been goofing up today, so don't worry about that. He took chapters for the BTK story, this made-up thing that he had, and he taped it to a stop sign. He taped it to a public stop sign for people to see. It got to the point where Dennis was writing letters on a somewhat regular basis to the police. In one of his letters, he asked the police a question. He said, by the way, police, if I were to give you a floppy disk, because I have so much information to share, if I were to give you a floppy disk, you can't trace that to me, can you? There's no way you could trace that, right? I just want to know. And so the police responded, anonymous ad or whatever anonymous thing in the newspaper. The police say, yes, to Dennis, we cannot trace a floppy disk. And he did. He sent them a floppy disk, the disk that it was the best they had back in the day, you remember that? He sent them that with information about himself. And lo and behold, on this disk, there was some deleted data. It's called metadata. And it has some file information, some titles, some things like that the police were able to look into, connect a few dots, find some relatives. One thing leads to another. That was how they eventually brought down Dennis. That's how Dennis finally got caught 14 years later. And a lot of people, when you think about his story, you think about this guy, you think, man, it sounds like he just wanted to be caught. You know what I mean? You know how some people just feel so guilty, feel so bad for what they've done, that eventually it tears them up so much that they're just guilty conscience, whatever, and they just want to be caught. And so they act out in these various ways. Now, I recognize that that is a thing. I recognize that that is sometimes what happens. But in the case of Dennis, I really don't think that's what happened. I don't think he had a guilty conscience. I mean, someone who could commit that many murders methodically over such a long period of time and then wait that long, you really think he felt that sorry for it? I don't think he had much of a conscience. I don't think he felt that at all. So why this banter with the police? Why this wanting to get the stuff out there, to communicate and stuff like that? I don't think it was because of a guilty conscience. I think it was because he wanted to relate. Dennis wanted to be known. Dennis is a powerful illustration of something that all of us have. This has to do with the way God created each and every one of us. There is a giant hole in all of us that is meant to be filled with meaningful relationships. Even the most isolated among us, even the most sadistic, and worst people among us long to have meaningful friendships, long to know others and to be known. That is why God says so much in the Bible about friendship, about meaningful friends. There's a ton of it in there. We're just going through the book of Proverbs, so I'm going to read out some verses and let you listen to them, and I'll summarize them once I get through them, because there's a lot of verses. You won't have time to follow along with me. Proverbs chapter 12, verse 26. The righteous choose their friends carefully, but the way of the wicked leads them astray. Proverbs 18, verse 24. One who has unreliable friends soon comes to ruin, but there is a friend who sticks closer than a brother. Proverbs chapter 22, verse 24, 25. Do not make friends with a hot-tempered person. Do not associate with one easily angered, or you may learn their ways and get yourself ensnared. Proverbs 16, the last part of verse 28, says that a gossip separates close friends. And then a page later, Proverbs 17, verse 9. Whoever would foster love covers over an offense, but whoever repeats the matter separates close friends. So to quickly summarize, in Proverbs 12:26, you have choose your friends carefully. In 18:24, you have a close friend is better than many acquaintances. Good point. In 22:24, you have this admonition, don't be friends with a quick-tempered person. In 16:28, you have this teaching about gossip. Gossip separates close friends. And then in 17:9, you have this other teaching that bringing up past mistakes is another way to separate close friends, if you can't let go of the past. All of these are very good, valuable teachings that God has about friendship. I think you'll understand them, and so because of that, I'm not going to spend any more time on them. Not going to spend any more time on them because there's more things that God says about friendship, and these particular things, these two things in particular, I think are less understood today, and so they deserve extra attention. As a matter of fact, these are the kind of things that if you're like me, you may have glossed over them several times and decided, I don't understand, so I'm just not going to apply that. Now, picture it this way. Let's suppose we had a table up here, and this table had all sorts of stuff on it. On this side of the table, it had a stick of butter, a couple cups of flour, a cup of sugar, vanilla extract, baking soda, and various other types of ingredients. And if I were to come up and say, hey, here, want some? And I hand you a stick of butter, go ahead, take a bite, enjoy, take a bite. You'd probably give me a weird look like, haha, yeah, very funny. Flour, anyone? Cup of flour? Hey, you want a teaspoon of vanilla extract? Now, unless you're a middle schooler, I doubt you're going to do this. And even so, a lot of people, the next question might be, all right, how much money am I going to make if I put that in my mouth? How much money are you going to pay me for doing that, right? And if I say, no, it's for your enjoyment, it's for your pleasure, you're going to be like, yeah, very funny. No, thank you. I don't want a spoonful of baking soda. That's ridiculous. I don't want a spoonful of salt. No, thank you. But if we take those exact same ingredients, all of the appropriate same ingredients, we mix them together properly, and we bake them into your favorite cake, would you like a bite of your favorite cake? And if it truly is your favorite cake, a lot of us are going to be like, I shouldn't, but absolutely, bring it. Give me more. It's the same ingredients. It's the same stuff. Why is it you were repulsed by it before, but now you want it, you desperately want it? What's the deal? Because it's your cake. It's been put together. It makes sense together, but separately, it's just kind of, here's the thing. I want you to picture it this way. If we were going to make your favorite cake, whatever that is, and pretend you like cake, or imagine something else if you don't like cake, right? Your favorite dessert item or your favorite thing. And we started setting out the ingredients for it, and you walked in and you saw these ingredients, and you're like, whoa, that's way too much butter. I don't need that. Way too much sugar. I don't like flour. I don't want any flour in this. No vanilla extract. Have you seen how potent that stuff is? No, I don't want that. Baking soda, you're silly. I don't put toothpaste in my food, so get that out of here. You know what I mean? If you were to just nitpick and say, I don't want this, I don't want this, I don't want this, throw those out, now make it. Make my favorite cake. And if the cook was just following the instructions, if you said, okay, and they put it all together, and they tried to make your favorite cake, would it be your favorite cake? No. Because in order for it to be the cake, it has to have everything, all the ingredients put together properly in order to be your favorite cake. If you start cherry picking and pulling things out, you're going to end up with something, but what is it? it may be okay. It may be absolutely disgusting, but whatever it is, it's probably not going to be nearly as good as your favorite cake. It's not going to be nearly as good as what it could have been if you put all the ingredients together. Why am I harping on ingredients in cake? Because I think in our society, and I think even us as Christians, oftentimes don't really understand friendship. We don't understand friendship as good as God meant for it to be because we throw parts of it out. We think there's some things about friendship, things that the Bible talks about that we're like, oh, I don't know about if I want to follow that. That sounds a little harsh. That sounds a little, I don't know if I can do that. Let's just lay that aside. And the other things that make sense to me, all right, I'll accept those. And that's going to be the kind of friendships I have. If you do that, yeah, you will have friendships. How good are those friendships? How significant, how meaningful? Are they everything they could be? No, because you're missing some key things. And today I want to talk about two of those things. There are two key ingredients to a deep, real, meaningful friendship that are found in the book of Proverbs, and I bet you a lot of us haven't paid close enough attention to these two ingredients. I'm going to tell you what they are right now. Here they are. Ingredient number one, wealth. Wealth. Ingredient number two, wounds. As in the painful, I'm getting hurt kind, wounding, wounds. Those are the two ingredients that Proverbs has about friendship, wealth and wounds. Let's start with wealth. I'm going to again read some scriptures for you. Proverbs chapter 14, verse 20 says, the poor are shunned, even by their neighbors, but the rich have many friends. Proverbs 19, verse 4, wealth attracts many friends, but even the closest friend of the poor person deserts them. Verse 6 and 7, a few verses after that in Proverbs 19. Many curry favor with a ruler, and everyone is a friend of one who gives gifts. The poor are shunned by all their relatives. How much more do their friends avoid them? Though the poor pursue them with pleading, they are nowhere to be found. Now I'm going to cut you some slack and assume a lot of you are going to be like me. When you're first reading these verses, you're thinking, God, what on earth are you talking about? Because we know the stories. We know the world, right? Guy, lonely, doesn't really have many friends, wins the lottery, and then all of a sudden, does he have friends? Oh, yeah, they come out of nowhere. Relatives, friends, hey, buddy. Why? Because he's rich. But are those people good friends? Are they meaningful friends? Are they the kind of friends you want around? No, they're just there for his money. And then if someone is poor, or someone doesn't have money or whatever, but they have a friend, you automatically assume, well, their friend's probably a good friend, right? Because no ulterior motives, they don't have anything, so must be a more meaningful friendship. You're right. We know these things are true. Don't you think God knows they're true too? Yes, he's God. So we got to ask ourselves the question, what on earth is God talking about here in saying that wealth is a requirement for good friendships, that wealth is so important for friendships? This is a great opportunity for us because it begs the question. It makes us want to go deeper. And a lot of times, particularly in the book of Proverbs, you need to do that. You can't just read it on the surface and think you understand what's being said because there are some Proverbs that target on very, very specific truths. Specific truths that sometimes don't apply except in certain situations and in certain ways. And sometimes you'll have back-to-back Proverbs that seem to contradict themselves, but that's on purpose because in one sense it's true this way, and in another sense this opposite fact is true, but it has to be true in that way. It makes you think. God wants us to think, so think. Wealth, friendships. Wealth, friendships. In order to be a good friend, you have to have something to share. Sometimes we struggle because we think of wealth as just money. Yeah, wealth can be just money, but wealth can be lots of things. Don't you know people who are a wealth of knowledge? Don't you know people who are a wealth of wisdom, or some people who have a wealth of experience? There are some people that are just so good at being committed. They're so good at being patient. They're so good at listening. That is their wealth. And if you have that, you have something to share. And if your friend has that, they have something to share with you. That kind of overflow, that kind of excess, that can help lead to a great friendship. But in order for that to happen, you have to have something to give. So I was trying to think of a good example, a good way to illustrate this, and I thought, okay, well, I need to zone in on my best friend in order to use like a real life illustration of this. So who's my best friend? Well, quite honestly, I married my best friend. My best friend is my wife, Lacey. She's my best friend. I married my best friend. If anyone says you shouldn't do that, they're stupid. Simple as that. You should marry your best friend. If you don't, you're an idiot. Sorry, that's on you. You'll find out later. Marry your best friend. Absolutely. I mean, if you can. Yeah, absolutely, right? That's a good decision. And so that's what I did. That's good advice. And so in order to maintain a great friendship, how do you think we did this? Well, before we got married, when we were dating, made sure to keep things as fair as possible because we wanted to have an equal relationship. So if we went on dates or anything, she paid for her stuff, I paid for my stuff. Whatever I wanted, I paid for. Whatever she wanted, she paid for. When we finally got engaged, I really liked that too because she paid for her ring and I paid. Well, I didn't get a ring at the time, but later on I was going to pay for my wedding ring, and so I did. She can pay for her wedding ring. I pay for mine. It's real good, real good. As a matter of fact, a few years, well, not even that far into our marriage, we realized like this whole one bed thing, we're banging into each other all the time. We got separate beds. It's wonderful. Stretch out, relax. It's really good. As a matter of fact, we even divided up the house. My side's over here and her side's over there. It's my castle, my domain, and that's her domain. It's just wonderful. The latest thing we're still trying to figure out is the kids. I'm going to take 3, and she's going to take the other 3. We're going to split them up evenly, too. We just haven't quite figured out I'm concerned that more people aren't laughing, actually. I'm really a little bit concerned. You honestly think this is how this works? You think that's how I married my best friend, is that this is... I think you guys know, right? That is absolutely false, and I'm offended that anyone might think otherwise, all right? I did marry my best friend, and what does that look like? We are as intertwined as could be. My baggage has now become her baggage, and her baggage has now become my baggage, and I would have it no other way. That's how we have such a great friendship. We are incredibly intertwined. What she does affects me, what I do affects her, and if I'm struggling, if I'm hurting, I have someone that understands me that I can lean on, that has some support. And if she's struggling, she's hurting, she has someone that she can lean on that understands her, that has some support. We both have various things to bring to the table, and we share that with each other. That's how we have such a great friendship. Make sense? That's how you have a great friendship too. Even if it's not a marriage, you bring something to the table. Another way we could say it, maybe this will communicate, a friendship that costs you nothing would be a friendship worth nothing. But a friendship that costs you something, that's a friendship worth something. Understand? But it's not just the cost factor. It's not just the wealth. There's a second ingredient that oftentimes gets left over because it sounds even worse. Wounds. Wounding. Proverbs chapter 27, verse 6 says that wounds from a friend can be trusted, but an enemy multiplies kisses. A few verses up in Proverbs 27:17, this is a famous one. I bet a lot of you know this one. As iron sharpens iron, so one person, what? Sharpens another. You know what sharpening is? That's cutting away at something. That's grinding away at something. That is removing materials in order to make something refined, something sharp. Wounds inflicted. How does that make sense? It sounds a little strange, doesn't it? And I need to throw in a caveat here because I want to be clear. When we talk about wounding in the biblical sense, we are not talking about an abusive relationship. Abuse in a relationship is bad no matter what. That's not okay. The Bible is not condoning any sort of abusive relationships. That's not what we mean when we talk about wounds. So what do we mean? Well, let me give you an illustration. Maybe this will help. There's a man, his name is Tom Hollowak. Tom Hollowak, and in the year 1986, he was one of the masterminds, the key thinkers behind an event they were going to pull off. This event was called Balloon Fest 86. Balloon Fest 86 was put on by the United Way, and it was designed to help generate some much-needed income for the city of Cleveland, Ohio. This event would make the Guinness Book of World Records for the largest ever balloon launch, the largest ever balloon release. So the way this worked, and they did it, September 27th, 1986, they took approximately 1.5 million helium balloons and they released them into the skies of the city of Cleveland, Ohio. Now, Tom had planned this out very carefully. It takes a lot to pull off an event like this. I mean, they had crazy stuff going on. They had this massive net structure that they built up to try to contain this 1.5 million balloons and release them all at once, because that was kind of the idea. So they had this superstructure built. They had all these plans. Tom made sure that the balloons were biodegradable, which, good job, Tom, good move. And he also had him and I guess some others had studied balloons. They had expertise in the areas of balloons. And I want to know where you get that degree, by the way, your balloon studies. I want to get a PhD in balloon studies. That's pretty sweet. Then the government would hire me for something. But nonetheless, right, they had these balloon experts, and the way this works, apparently, is a balloon filled with helium will rise in the air approximately 6.2 miles. And then because of the pressure differences inside versus outside the balloon will burst into tiny fragments, and it will slowly dissipate down to Earth until it's gone. It disintegrates into oblivion, and that's that. And that's the way it's supposed to work. And that's sort of how it could have worked for Balloon Fest 86. But sadly, it's not quite what happened. They did the launch. The launch is still in the Guinness Book of World Records, world's biggest balloon launch. They did it. But shortly after the launch, a cold front came through, a storm front came through. And that front pushed some of the balloons that were supposed to keep floating up. It pushed some of them back down to Earth. Approximately 1 million of the 1.5 million balloons released were blown back down to Earth toward the city. The result was a mass littering of balloons all over Northeast Ohio. Much of Cleveland's waterways and drainage got clogged. There were numerous traffic incidents. Cars driving around, what is that? Smashing into people. All sorts of fender benders all over the city. People are like, what is going on here? The runway at a local airport had to get shut down. There were too many balloons all over the runway. They couldn't launch the plane. They couldn't take off. So flights got delayed. There was a lady not far off that owned prize-winning Arabian horses, owned a couple of Arabian horses. One of the horses saw the sky falling of all these balloons, and it got spooked. It got freaked out, it smashed into a fence, injured itself, and the lady sued them for $100,000. But worse than that, there were two fishermen who went fishing the night before on Lake Erie, and they went missing. Don't know if their boat capsized or what, but they found their little boat washed up on the shore, but they didn't find the fishermen. And so shortly after the balloon release, they realized, man, we gotta put on a search party. We gotta find these people. And so they go to take the helicopter up, and they quickly realize, we can't get the helicopter in the air. There are way too many balloons up here. So they couldn't launch the search helicopter, so they had to just rely on their boats. And when they took their boats in the water, they looked around and they realized balloons everywhere. The entire waterway was littered with balloons. There was no possible way you could identify a person floating in that water. You just couldn't see them. It was complete camouflage. And so later these two men turned up, their bodies washed up, they were dead. One of their wives sued for $3.2 million. So we have this event that was designed to generate money and awareness for a city that really needed it, something big for the record books. And what did it actually accomplish? Well, at the end of the day, the event lost more money than it made. And it helped contribute to the deaths of 2 people and the numerous injuring and difficulty to other people and animals. Now, I want to go back to Tom, one of the key organizers of this event. In hindsight, don't you think Tom wishes he had someone talk some sense into him? Don't you think Tom, in hindsight, maybe not in the moment, for sure not in the moment, but in hindsight, Tom was a man that went from a wonderful, happy idea for a fun unity-style event to help support a city to a man that now feels forever guilty for 2 people dying and many other people being hurt or bothered. And don't you think he wishes he had a friend close enough to him to come alongside him and say, hey, buddy, I know this means so much to you. I know it's so significant, and I know it's going to be such an embarrassment, but there's a storm front coming through. Shouldn't you delay this launch? Shouldn't you play it safe and not risk what might happen? And at the time, I'm sure, you think Tom's going to want to hear that? Biggest thing of his life, something that's going to land him in the Guinness Book of World Records? You think he wants to hear someone saying, no, don't do that, just can your idea? No, he doesn't want to hear that. But in hindsight, does he wish someone would have told him that? I'm quite confident he does. If Tom had a friend close enough to wound him, to say what needed to be said, to say that thing that hurts, that he doesn't want to hear, and it's going to cost him, it would have been so much better for him. You're going to have to excuse the pun, but what I'm suggesting is you need to sometimes have a friend that can burst your balloon. You know what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying? Okay? Is that the kind of friend that you have? Is that the kind of friend that you are? That's what Proverbs is talking about when it says wounds from a friend. They can be trusted. And so today, as we wrap up our service, I want to wrap up by thinking about a friendship that actually does not follow logically at all. A friendship that we all have that we just should not have. Because if you think about it, this friendship that we have with the Creator, with God, why does it exist? Today we talked about the missing ingredients of friendship, right? Wealth and wounds. So when it comes to God, what wealth do you have to offer God? What do you have that God doesn't already have that you can just give to God that he needs? What do you have to offer him? What about wounds, right? What are you going to do to make God better? How are you going to, wound God, say what needs to be said so that God can improve? What do you have to offer there? We got nothing. We have absolutely nothing. But yet you read in the Bible, Philippians chapter 2, it says that Jesus, God in flesh, even though he lived in all this wealth, he owns everything, he's God. He set it all aside and he humbled himself and he came down like an obedient slave and died in a human body. Set aside all his wealth for us and suffered. And the prophet Isaiah, chapter 53, verse 5 says that this Jesus, this suffering servant, by his wounds, you and I have been healed. By his wounds. Jesus offered up all that wealth, set it aside. He offered up all the wounds that he could inflict, but instead had them inflicted on himself instead of us, so that we could have a friendship, a connection forever with God. So today we're going to, as we do every week, we're going to take this packet at one of these tables. There's also one up in the balcony. We're going to take a packet that has bread, reminds us of Jesus' broken body, and it has juice underneath that when we drink it, it reminds us of Jesus' blood that was poured out so that we could be forgiven. But as we drink this and we remember this represents a one-sided friendship that we bring nothing to the table for, but we get. Let's ask ourselves, what? Given what God has done for me, what kind of a friend am I to those around me? Would you ask that? What kind of a friend am I, are we, to those around us? So when you're ready, take a few moments to reflect, but when you're ready, come to one of the tables to receive the Lord's Supper.
We're so glad you joined us this morning. One really quick announcement. Tonight, the study on Hebrews is being postponed, so enjoy your evening. And keep praying, keep thinking about the fact that the amazing race is almost here. It's happening next week. Continue praying. Seth already mentioned it, but it's just huge to know that so much money's been raised, so many hands are helping, and so thank you for that. And with that in mind, I'm going to pray for us, and we'll be dismissed. God, you are truly amazing. Thank you for your love. Thank you for your grace. Thank you for the fact that you call us friend, and that we have a friend in you. God, that you've given us a real relationship with you where our sins have been forgiven, where we can live in a life of hope, a life of freedom, and a life in truth because of what Jesus did. And God, I pray that motivates us to have deeper, richer friendships. God, that it helps us to make the choices you want us to make and to be the light you want us to be here in this community. God, I pray as a result of what we talked about this morning, as what we've engaged with, Lord, that we would be a people more prepared for what you would have us do with the time you've given us here in Merritt Island. I pray in Jesus' name. Have a blessed week. We'll see you next time.